2NURFM.com, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
The University of Newcastle has a fabulous program called the New Professors Talk, and it's really interesting. With the world economy shaping up as it is at the moment, we're seeing China soften somewhat, its economy becoming more complex, I think most people would describe it as. Professor Morris Altman joins us here at the University of Newcastle, and he's giving a new professor talk called What's Love Got to Do With It? Professor, hello and welcome firstly, and welcome to town. Welcome to the university. Glad to have you.
Oh, thanks a lot. It's great to be in Newcastle.
So what has love got to do with it, Professor Altman? What is it?
Well, what it has to do with, different ways of enhancing productivity, improving the well-being of communities, of employees, and indeed of even management. It's a different way of looking at how to inspire, or economists would say incentivize people to do better.
So we're talking about economic sustainability, and always the underlying thing is growth. We always want growth at the cost of everything else, it would seem. So it seems to me that your talk is going to be saying, let's take a step back from that and look at how we make it a more inclusive process.
Well, it actually even goes a bit beyond that, because what I'm arguing and what I'm saying is that growth in many ways is good because it allows people, for example, who are poor to be better off. It allows us to achieve better health outcomes and things like that. And that's what most people want. But it's a question of, how does one achieve more growth and more development? Is more growth and development only achievable by introducing, let's say, harsher working conditions, lower wages, for example, more of a stick as opposed to a carrot, which is the perspective that a lot of people take? With growth, does growth require us to have a increasingly dirty environment, for example? Is there these type of trade-offs? Yeah,
it's interesting because I've been doing a bit of reading on the Chinese economy, which I described as becoming more complex, and it strikes me that things like the environment, corruption, all of these things are really now coming into play in the Chinese economy. But many people would ask the question, how can we compete with countries like China unless we do bring wages down? And that's the conundrum our economy seems to face here in Australia. What are your thoughts on that? How do we do it differently?
Well, going all the way back to Adam Smith, which people argue is the founder of modern economics, yes, writing a few hundred years ago, he also made the case that if you simply focus on cutting wages, you end up with a lower productivity economy. If you have people who don't think through things in terms of being empathetic, yes, with other individuals, you'll have a harsher economy, but it's not going to be necessarily more productive. So if you cut wages by 20% and productivity falls by 20%.
Yes, and of course then you've got people rioting in the streets and striking, and it's often not the most productive way to go in a unionised country such as ours as well.
And even in China, you have the same type of events occurring. So there is another path, which is that within the firm, if wages happen to be, let's say, $20 an hour, then there are other ways to make the firm more productive and also improving the quality of the product by having a more inclusive work environment, an environment where there's a higher level of trust and people are willing to give back to the firm because they know that in turn, either their wages won't fall, working conditions might improve, there might be something going back to the community.
Okay. Is this kind of Pollyanna economics, though? Is it sort of really rose-coloured optimism?
No, it's not, because it's based on a lot of empirical evidence. So the empirical evidence actually does suggest that to make it simple in some sense, you have two paths to growth. One is the path which hinges upon, say, lower wages, lower quality product. Another path is better, I won't say necessarily higher wages, but better working conditions, yes, and a higher quality of product. And one can do this in Australia. I come from Canada. One can do that in Canada. One can do that in Germany. And sometimes that involves some restructuring of the economy, refocusing in certain areas. But the thing is, one can do this in a sustainable way, having a more caring economy. So, and this is actually hard economics. It's not soft economics.
No. And it's interesting because also flexibility comes into it as well, and how people actually go about doing their jobs. Technology is another major component, I should imagine. I definitely want to come along and hear your talk because I'm so fascinated in this area of economics, because I too believe there is a better way where we can all prosper and grow the pie. Professor Morris Altman, you're giving your new professor's talk on Wednesday at the Newcastle Museum, 6:15 for a 6:30 start. And if you're interested, if you believe that what love has to do with it is all important, then I'd advise you to be there. Professor Morris Altman, welcome to town and thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.